If you don't like intros and just want to learn something, each section of this wave management guide has a timestamp below. My name is Rival and I've peaked 450 LP as a top laner. Today I'm here to discuss wave management and how understanding this absolutely crucial concept can single-handedly win you games. Outside of the examples I show, the gameplay shown will be the one I had yesterday on Riven versus the rank 2 top laner on my server. While I get an early gank really helping me out, it's the wave state I'm able to maintain on him that really gets me a lead. I believe you can probably get to low diamond before even needing to learn wave manipulation, but after people learn to use it against you, you're going to have a hard time climbing. Furthermore, wave management is very prevalent in today's meta where teleport isn't taking nearly as much, meaning you're going to have a hard time stabilizing if your wave is mismanaged. Have you ever wondered why Renekton is basically pick or ban in pro game but griefing your solo queue? Renekton is the single best melee champion at wave manipulation and dive setup. If pro teams prioritize a champion that is the best wave manipulator in the game, that should give you an insight into just how powerful playing around the wave is. You'll often see challenger players picking up kills on smurfs with great ease. It's odd to watch because it just looks like the enemy player was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, exposing them to the death. Your thinking is correct, but not how you might assume. Through deliberate and subtle micro actions, challenger players put them in that spot through manipulation. It is no mistake the enemy champion was flashless and overextending. Behind most, if not every single auto attack, there is a thought process or goal that player is trying to achieve. They rarely have to mechanically outplay or do anything crazy to get a lead, but all of a sudden they're 3 levels up and the enemy can't play the game. While I'm a top laner and will be using top lane examples as is the most volatile and punishing in regard to wave management, I'll also include examples of how junglers and support players can generate leads through catching and setting up waves for their laners later in the video. Every technique that I cover here can be translated in the same regard to mid lane and bot lane. Prefacing what we're about to cover, here are some definitions of things that affect wave state. Thinning. To thin the wave means to use spells on a large wave that is being slow pushed or built into you to kill some minions so that the wave can be frozen. If the wave is too big, you can't tank or manage it properly and it'll crash, ruining the freeze. Thinning is a skill in itself. Opportunities to thin the wave may not always present themselves if your opponent is skills and know you want to thin the wave, but they want to crash. The windows to thin the wave are usually when your enemy misspaces, goes to ward, or uses an ability. Splitting the map. Splitting the map is simply when a jungler clears from their own red-blue to the enemy red-blue, as opposed to their own buff to their own buff. Whatever side the jungler clears into is usually considered strong side, as the jungler will have to stay that side of the map for gold income and can help the closest lane or gank more often. Strong side and weak side are circumstantial on splitting the map or not, as well as kill distribution. Whatever side of the map has had resources allocated to it or accrued is strong side. Weak side is the direct opposite and can also be given if that lane is played against. For example, if your jungler keeps ganking bot lane and your ADC is 2-0 with plates while your top lane 0-3 after being camped, you're weak side and they are strong side. Being a good weak side player is a crucial skill in itself toward winning. The team isn't expecting you to carry, however, you now have the hardest job by having to do the most work with the least resources. A good weak side player can succeed in impacting the game despite being behind and not letting their lane bleed too heavily into the rest of the map. For example, if your tower has just fallen to Herald and you're 0-1 or 0-2 after being weak-sided, you've done a pretty good job at stopping the bleed. If both your towers are down and you're 0-7, you have probably single-handedly lost your team the game unless your bot lane is just as fed. I know you don't want to hear it, but even though your jungler never ganked or counter-ganked for you, dying that much is usually due to mistakes on your behalf and can definitely be improved on or prevented. You don't have to get dove, just sack the tower and come back after the jungler leaves. I know it's hard to watch them take plates and let minions die, but it's even harder doing that while grey screened. Tethering. Tethering is when you abuse the minion aggro coding to lead the wave off their set path in the middle of each lane. This is used to pull minions where you want and is typically how freezes or slow pushes are set up. Tethering aggro can be broken by exiting the minion's vision and going in and out of a lane brush. Now with some boring stuff out of the way, I need to provide tangible examples of effective wave setup and capitalization to give you a first-hand look at situations that can occur from correct wave management. Here I'll show 2 examples that put a champion at an extreme advantage in the lane. So much so that this lane would be over in a master game, even diamond. As a general rule of thumb, if the wave is coming into you, just be patient and stay healthy. Never trade into the wave unless you're trying to thin it. This is a setup example, but is a reflection of a real situation that can happen top lane. Riven overtrades into this Tryndamere while the wave is coming into her. Now a flashless Riven has to deal with a bounce that is about to happen after this entire wave dies to her tower. Overextending into a long lane champion with Ghost Up is just a death waiting to happen, at the hands of Tryndamere or the jungler. This situation is a literal chokehold. Riven cannot play the game without a jungler's help to break the freeze, and can even have difficulty standing in XP range, let alone last hitting. This freeze can maintain and Tryndamere can literally build a mythic sized advantage, all from that one misplay Riven made into a freeze from Tryndamere. Here, we see Renekton building a slow push into the enemy Riven. While last hitting, Renekton generates enough fury for an empowered stun under the tower. As Elise arrives, Renekton syncs the timing and pushes the wave under the tower for the dive. Riven is absolutely powerless as she easily gets one shot and has to watch the entire wave die from the green screen while Renekton and Elise feast on the tower plates. Observing what very realistic in-game situations look like from correct wave management should help you to understand how game-winning leads can be generated without really having to outplay your opponent or even interact with them. Next, we'll discuss some pros and cons of freezing to further understand when to use this and when to not. Freezing the wave can protect you from ganks, puts the enemy on long lane while they're susceptible to ganks and overextension, draws pressure and puts the enemy in rushed or frustrating situations leading to mistakes and tilt. It accents champions with short trade patterns such as Riven or Renekton while hindering long trade pattern champions such as Jax, Tryndamere or Set. Why freezing can be bad. The enemy can just leave if they can't break the freeze and gank elsewhere. This needs to be clearly communicated to your team that they'll be freezing, so you should expect some more random roams. It also makes you commit to the freeze, essentially relieving all pressure you have on the map as the enemy knows where you are at all times. Now we're going to go in depth in wave management techniques. Firstly, we have the level 1 pull. This is usually only done when you're blue side because junglers on red side often start at their red buff, requiring a leash by enemy top, so they'll be out of lane when the minions first meet. Level 1 pulling requires good awareness and foresight of the enemy jungler. If you're predicting they'll split the map, you should do this and preempt a freeze at the front of your own tower. This usually forces the enemy top to give a bad leash or they'll miss 1 minion of XP, which in early laning is huge. If the enemy jungler splits the map, be aware of to stay healthy on your freeze and the crash as you may get dove leading to a weak side situation. I would even ward my own jungle if I knew a dive might be considered by the enemy. Your own jungler can probably turn the dive with enough warning. Cheetah recall. Resetting on the first 3 wave crash is called a cheetah recall. Coined by LS, a cheetah recall is literally a slow push into base that gives you a free chance to buy your first component item and refills while getting back to lane with a very healthy wave state that can be frozen while at an item advantage. Just getting a cheetah recall off can force the enemy to have to teleport or fall into deficit. It is especially effective in this combat summoner top lane meta where teleport isn't taken as often. I've literally won lanes off a cheetah recall, take time to learn this properly.
Okay, recall. No, not right in front of him, he's gonna walk up and eat you.
He won't do shit, he's scared.
Okay.
Freezing. This is probably the most written word in all of League of Legends gameplay diction ever because it is so effective and essential to learn at higher echelons of play. To freeze the wave means to hold the enemy minions just outside your own tower range, forcing an unsafe farming environment for the enemy laner as they need to overextend just to last hit and can't safely trade onto you as you have the safety of tower just behind you. Freezes should be done a tiny bit further out. Random minion aggro often lets them wander under tower for no reason, which can be detrimental and eventually cause a healthy freeze to break for no reason other than RNG. To freeze the wave, you need to have at least 3 to 4 more enemy minions than your own. Because of the way your minions reinforce themselves faster due to being closer to their own spawn point, this 3 to 4 minion deficit ensures the freeze maintains. If the wave is even, a slow push will ensue in the opposite direction the minions meet. Freezing on an enemy laner that is without flash or already behind is completely restricting their income flow and will require at least a support to come and break the freeze. Slow pushing. Slow pushing is essentially never really bad unless you have somewhere to be and will always be stronger than fast pushing. To slow push, you need to build a large wave on your own side heading in the enemy's direction. This is done by only last hitting. Building a large wave does a number of things. Firstly, it can help protect you from ganks. In early game, lots of minions are almost like having another champion there and can be good cover from skillshot reliant champions like Elise or Lee Sin. Furthermore, a 2v1 can actually happen if the fight goes on long enough because of the amount of minion aggro the enemy will draw. Secondly, it gives you more time to roam, ward, reset, or invade the enemy jungle as the wave will still be being farmed under the tower while you miss no minions. Thirdly, it gives a great opportunity to hit the enemy tower for plates or set up a dive. If you hit the enemy tower for damage and they hit you back, they're going to draw 10 plus minions worth of aggro and eat a lot of damage, making them even more susceptible to a dive. Dives are always set up in high elo on a slow push. This gives the jungler and laner a lot of time and free access to hit the enemy champion before being tower aggroed. A dive succeeding off a slow push is catastrophic and often lane losing for the dead champion as they'll miss that much golden experience while also having to come back to a bouncing wave that will probably get frozen. Slow pushing is also really frustrating to play against as you can't trade into such a big wave or you'll eat a ton of aggro. This is where smart wave thinning is essential to have honed as a skill while you're being slow pushed on. Fast pushing. Fast pushing is one of the weakest forms of wave management but the most common in lower elos because players don't understand how effective the other methods are. Fast pushing should only be done when the enemy laner has completely left the lane. This forces the laner back to the lane sooner rather than later as the wave is crashing and you're probably hitting plates. It should also only be done if you want to reset but the wave is in an unhealthy or volatile position. This will cause a bounce. Always be aware when fast pushing that due to the lower minion count, the enemy can freeze the wave. Ensure that they're out of lane before doing this or risk shooting yourself in the foot. Bounce. A bounce is where the wave crashes and starts building to head in the opposite direction, i.e. it bounces off the tower. A bouncing wave is good because it means you just have to be patient and the wave will eventually come to you, allowing you to farm it safely under your tower. By using smart wave thinning, you can set up healthy freezes on bouncing waves for even more protection. Learning how and when to make the wave bounce will allow you to protect yourself a lot better. Proxy. Proxy is when a champion denies the rules of laning and just leaves to go farm between towers. Proxy is actually hard to respond to because in attending the proxying champion, your own wave will crash and you'll be denied. These champions are usually ones that can escape from ganks easily and have less than optimal laning phases, so minimal champion interaction is actually preferred until they scale. Before we get into some mid and late game wave management, if you like educational YouTube content and you're enjoying this video, leave a like and consider subscribing as it's free and you can always change your mind later. I also made a video on my top 5 real tips I use to climb to Grandmaster. If you'd like to watch this one, the link is in the description. Now for some mid and late game wave control. This is actually really not that prevalent in solo queue, but very important in pro play. I don't see this used very often in any region of solo queue, but I'll explain it anyway. Without tier 1 or 2 towers, huge slow pushes can eventuate just on the wave eating itself over and over again should the wave be left unattended. If an objective is spawning, set up a slight slow push to head in the enemy direction on the opposite side of the map, i.e. Dragon set up top wave, Baron set up bottom wave. While you're denying yourself farm, if you set it up right, the gigantic enemy wave will force an enemy to either have to give the objective or let the massive amount of golden XP die to a tower. If at the very least, having to force the enemy to use their teleport to answer the wave. Along the lines of tier 1 towers being broken, if you're behind, it's actually not a bad idea to freeze the wave outside your tier 2 to regain some lost golden experience. Again, not really seen in solo queue but often in pro play, it still forces the enemy laner to have to overextend for farm, generating greater risk of being ganked. Be sure to communicate that the enemy top is now on the loose though. Nothing worse than freezing at tier 2 only to see a 3-item set dive your bot lane. Now onto some more wave management tips. You should last hit all game. When pushing waves or taking random farm around the map, don't stop actively last hitting. Rushing to shove waves can cause you to miss free gold while you're still getting the wave in at roughly the same rate. This small bit of care can usually end up getting you at least an extra 0.5 CS per minute. In the vein of rushing to clear waves, super minions are worth almost 100 gold and can really get you to your spikes when you're behind, so you should focus extra hard to ensure you don't miss the farm. Last hitting them can actually be really difficult, so to make this easier, click on the super minion and pay attention to how much damage your auto attacks are doing to it. When it gets low, look at the health bar in the top left and auto it when you kill it. If you're not sure where the enemy wave is, look at your own on the minimap. The enemy wave will be directly opposite it. This way you can tell if it's a cannon wave or if your wave is going to crash in time. As a support or jungler, if you see your own laner leaving base but a wave is about to crash, go and tether it for them to ensure a freeze. This does multiple things for your laner. It minimizes loss, protects them from ganks and equalizes XP. 10 seconds out of your path did all that, and it's very underutilized in all elos but extremely effective. Now we're going to discuss things to be aware of when using wave manipulation. These techniques can actually work against you if you froze on a very strong roamer like Quinn. She's just going to leave lane and go gank somewhere else, leaving you to get flamed. Do not fast push into a heavy scaler, as this just gives them free farm over and over. You should always set up a freeze against a weak early laner, for example a Kayle or Nasus, and force them off the wave to deny gold or stacks. Be hyper aware to not die while you're slow pushing. The threat of a crash is denied if you're not actually alive to see the wave crash. You've just granted your lane opponent a freeze. You should only have the goal of resetting or diving, so staying healthy behind a big wave is important. What to do if you're getting frozen or slow pushed on. Prior to it actually happening, you should foresee that you're either going to get frozen on or dove. If a freeze is going to happen, ping your jungler before it happens to walk the wave in. This minimizes your losses and sets the wave up to bounce back into you. If my opponent is creating a slow push, I immediately leave and go and place defensive wards. This way, I can ping for my jungle or mid to protect me or turn the dive. If worse comes to worse, you leave the tower and give plates or lose the wave. It's better off you at least staying alive to head back to the lane for experience than completely dying and giving them a free kill while losing the experience and gold anyway. Just take the loss, it's the correct thing to do even though it might not feel that way. If your jungle or mid aren't there to protect you, they're likely achieving something bot lane or securing an objective. The trade-off is usually worth it as you're the most consistent variable in-game and understand how to play from behind. Furthermore, if you know you're going to get played against heavily, think Renekton and Elise versus Riven, you could even take summoner spells or runes to protect you against the dive, like Exhaust or Unflinching. If you're being played against or are weak side, you should also itemize your defensive components first, making you tankier under the tower and more troublesome to dive. I hope this guide has taught you something, or at least given you your first step towards mastering wave management and climb to the elo you deserve. If you have any other topics you'd like me to cover or feedback, please leave them in the comments as I'd love to hear from you. May the gods of LP bless your climb.